The Pilgrim's Progress, Part 2, Chapter 5. The Pilgrim's Progress, by John Bunyan, Part 2, Chapter 5. The Palace Beautiful. Now, then, they were within sight of the porter's lodge, and they soon came up unto it. But they made the more haste after this to go thither, because it is dangerous travelling there in the night. So, when they were come to the gate, the guide knocked, and the porter cried,
"Who is there?"
But as soon as the guide had said,
"It is I,"
he knew his voice, and came down, for the guide had oft before that come thither as a conductor of pilgrims. When he was come down, he opened the gate, and seeing the guide stand just before it, for he saw not the women, for they were behind him, he said unto him,
"How now, Mr. Greatheart? What is your business here so late to-night?"
"I have brought,"
said he,
"some pilgrims hither, where by my lord's commandment they must lodge. I had been here some time ago, had I not been opposed by the giant that did use to back the lions. But I, after a long and tedious combat with him, have cut him off, and have brought the pilgrims hither in safety."
"Will you not go in and stay till morning?"
"No, I will return to my lord tonight."
"Oh, sir, I know not how to be willing you should leave us in our pilgrimage. You have been so faithful and so loving to us. You have fought so stoutly for us. You have been so hearty in counselling of us, that I shall never forget your favour towards us."
Then said Mercy,
"Oh, that we might have thy company to our journey's end! How can such poor women as we hold out in a way so full of troubles as this way is, without a friend and defender?"
Then said James, the youngest of the boys,
"Pray, sir, be persuaded to go with us and help us, because we are so weak, and the way so dangerous as it is."
"I am at my lord's commandment. If he shall allot me to be your guide quite through, I will willingly wait upon you. But here you failed at first, for when he bid me come thus far with you, then you should have begged me of him to have gone quite through with you, and he would have granted your request. However, at present I must withdraw, and so, good Christiana, Mercy, and my brave children, adieu."
Then the porter, Mr. Watchful, asked Christiana of her country and of her kindred, and she said,
"I come from the city of destruction. I am a widow woman, and my husband is dead. His name was Christian, the pilgrim."
"How?"
said the porter.
"Was he your husband?"
"Yes,
said she,
and these are his children, and this,"
pointing to Mercy,
"is one of my townswomen."
Then the porter rang his bell, as at such times he was wont, and there came to the door one of the maids, whose name was Humble Mind, and to her the porter said,
"Go, tell it within that Christiana, the wife of Christian, and her children, are come hither on pilgrimage."
She went in therefore and told it. But oh, what a noise for gladness was there within when the maid did but drop that word out of her mouth! So they came with haste to the porter, for Christiana stood still at the door. Then some of those within said unto her,
"Come in, Christiana, come in, thou wife of that good man. Come in, thou blessed woman, come in, with all that are with thee."
So she went in, and they followed her that were her children and her companions. Now when they were gone in, they were had into a very large room, where they were bidden to sit down. So they sat down, and the chief of the house were called to see and welcome the guests. Then they came in, and understanding who they were, did salute each other with a kiss, and said,
"Welcome, ye that bear the grace of God. Welcome to us, your friends."
Now, because it was somewhat late, and because the pilgrims were weary with their journey, and also made faint with the sight of the fight and of the terrible lions, therefore they desired as soon as might be to prepare to go to rest.
"Nay,"
said those of the family,
"refresh yourselves first with a morsel of meat."
For they had prepared for them a lamb with the accustomed sauce belonging thereto, for the porter had heard before of their coming, and had told it to them within. So when they had supped and ended their prayer with a psalm, they desired they might go to rest.
"But let us,"
said Christiana,
"if we may be so bold as to choose, be in that chamber that was my husband's when he was here."
So they had them up thither, and they lay all in a room. When they were at rest, Christiana and Mercy entered into discourse about things that were convenient.
Little did I think once, when my husband went on pilgrimage, that I should ever have followed.
And you as little thought of lying in his bed, and in his chamber to rest, as you do now.
And much less did I ever think of seeing his face with comfort, and of worshipping the Lord the King with him, and yet now I believe I shall.
Hark! Don't you hear a noise?
Yes, it is, as I believe, a noise of music, for joy that we are here.
Wonderful! Music in the house, music in the heart, and music also in heaven, for joy that we are here.
Thus they talked a while, and then betook themselves to sleep. So in the morning, when they were awake, Christiana said to Mercy,
What was the matter, that you did laugh in your sleep tonight? I suppose you were in a dream.
So I was, and a sweet dream it was. But are you sure I laughed?
Yes, you laughed heartily. But prithee, Mercy, tell me thy dream.
I was dreaming that I sat all alone in a solitary place, and was bemoaning of the hardness of my heart. Now I had not sat there long, but methought many were gathered about me to see me, and to hear what it was that I said. So they hearkened, and I went on bemoaning the hardness of my heart. At this some of them laughed at me, some called me fool, and some thrust me about. With that methought I looked up, and saw one coming with wings towards me. So he came directly to me and said, Mercy, what aileth thee? Now, when he had heard me make my complaint, he said, Peace be to thee. He also wiped mine eyes with his handkerchief, and clad me in silver and gold. He put a chain about my neck, and earrings in mine ears, and a beautiful crown on my head. Then he took me by the hand, and said, Mercy, come after me. So he went up, and I followed, till we came to a golden gate. Then he knocked, and when they within opened, the man went in, and I followed him up to a throne upon which one sat, and he said to me, Welcome, daughter. The place looked bright and twinkling, like the stars, or rather like the sun, and I thought I saw your husband there. So I awoke from my dream. But did I laugh?
Laugh? Ay, and well you might, to see yourself so well. For you must give me leave to tell you that I believe it was a good dream, and that as you have begun to find the first part true, so you shall find the second at last. God speaks once, yea, twice, yet man perceiveth it not, in a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falleth upon men, in slumberings upon the bed. We need not, when abed, to lie awake to talk with God. He can visit us while we sleep, and cause us then to hear his voice. Our heart oftentimes wakes when we sleep, and God can speak to that, either by words, by proverbs, or by signs and similitudes, as well as if one was awake.
Well, I am glad of my dream, for I hope ere long to see it fulfilled, to the making of me laugh again.
I think it is now high time to rise, and to know what we must do.
Pray, if they invite us to stay a while, let us willingly accept of the proffer. I am the willinger to stay here, to grow better acquainted with these maids. Methinks prudence, piety, and charity have very lovely and sober countenances.
We shall see what they will do.
So when they were up and ready, they came down, and they asked one another of their rest, and if it was comfortable or not.
Very good,
said Mercy.
It was one of the best night's lodging that ever I had in my life.
If you will be persuaded to stay here a while, you shall have what the house will afford.
Ay, and that with a very good will,
said Charity. So they consented, and stayed there about a month or above, and became very profitable one to another. Now, by that these pilgrims had been at this place a week, Mercy had a visitor that pretended some good will unto her, and his name was Mr. Brisk, a man of some breeding, and that pretended to religion, but a man that stuck very close to the world. So he came once or twice or more to Mercy, and offered love unto her. Now Mercy was a fair countenance, and therefore the more alluring. Her mind also was to be always busying of herself in doing. For when she had nothing to do for herself, she would be making of hose and garments for others, and would bestow them upon them that had need. And Mr. Brisk, not knowing where or how she disposed of what she made, seemed to be greatly taken, for that he found her never idle.
I will warrant her a good housewife,
quoth he to himself. Mercy then told the matter to the maidens that were of the house, and inquired of them concerning him, for they did know him better than she. So they told her that he was a very busy young man, and one who pretended to serve the Lord, but was, as they feared, a stranger to the power of that which is good.
Nay, then,
said Mercy,
I will look no more on him, for I purpose never to have a clog to my soul.
Prudence then replied that
there needed no great matter of discouragement to be given to him. Her continuing so as she had begun to do for the poor would quickly cool his courage.
So the next time he comes, he finds her at her old work, a-making things for the poor. Then said he,
What? Always at it?
Yes,
said she,
either for myself or for others.
And what canst thou earn a day?
quoth he.
I do these things,
said she,
that I may be rich in good works, laying up in store for myself a good foundation against the time to come, that I may lay hold on eternal life.
Why, prithee, what doest thou with them?
said he.
Clothe the naked,
said she. With that his countenance fell. So he forbore to come at her again, and when he was asked the reason why, he said that
Mercy was a pretty lass, but troubled with too much working for others.
When he had left her, Prudence said,
Did I not tell thee that Mr. Brisk would soon forsake thee? Yea, he will raise up an ill report of thee. For notwithstanding his pretence to serve bad, and his seeming love to Mercy, yet Mercy and he are of tempers so different that I believe they will never come together.
I might have had husbands afore now, though I spake not of it to any. But they were such as did not like my ways, though never did any of them find fault with my person, so they and I could not agree.
Mercy in our days is little set by, any further than to its name. The practice, which is set forth by their works, there are but few that can abide.
Well,
said Mercy,
if nobody will have me, I will die a maid, or my works shall be to me as a husband, for I cannot change my nature. And to have one that lies cross to me in this, that I purpose never to admit of as long as I live. I had a sister named Bountiful, that was married to one of these selfish people, but he and she could never agree, but because my sister was resolved to do as she had begun, that is, to show kindness to the poor, therefore her husband first cried her down in public, and then turned her out of his doors.
And yet he was a church member, I warrant you.
Yes, such a one as he was, and of such as he the world is now full, but I am for none of them at all.
Now Matthew, the eldest son of Christiana, fell sick, and his sickness was sore upon him, for he was much pained in his bowels, so that he was with it at times pulled, as it were, both ends together. There dwelt also not far from thence one Mr. Skill, an ancient and well-approved physician. So Christiana desired it, and they sent for him, and he came. When he was entered the room, and had a little observed the boy, he concluded that he was sick with the gripes. Then he said to his mother,
What diet has Matthew of late fed upon?
Diet?
said Christiana.
Nothing but that which is wholesome.
The physician answered,
This boy has been tampering with something that lies in his stomach undigested, and that will not away without means. And I tell you he must be purged, or else he will die.
Then said Samuel,
Mother, what was that which my brother did gather up and eat, so soon after we had come from the gate that is at the head of this way? You know that there was an orchard on the left hand, on the other side of the wall, and some of the trees hung over the wall, and my brother did pull down the branches and did eat.
True, my child,
said Christiana.
He did take thereof and did eat. Naughty boy as he was, I did chide him, and yet he would eat thereof.
I knew he had eaten something that was not wholesome food. And that food, to wit, that fruit, is even the most hurtful of all. It is the fruit of Beelzebub's orchard. I do marvel that none did warn you of it. Many have died thereof.
Then Christiana began to cry, and she said,
Oh, naughty boy, and oh, careless mother, what shall I do for my son?
Come, do not be too much dejected. The boy may do well again, but he must purge and vomit.
Pray, sir, try the utmost of your skill with him, whatever it costs.
Nay, I hope I shall be reasonable.
So he made him a purge, but it was too weak. It was said it was made of the blood of a goat, the ashes of a heifer, and with some of the juice of hyssop, etc. When Mr. Skill had seen that purge was too weak, he made one to the purpose. It was made, the name was written in Latin, ex carne et sanguine Christi, the body and blood of Christ. You know physicians give strange medicines to their patients, and it was made up into pills, with a promise or two, and a proportionable quantity of salt. Now he was to take them 3 at a time, fasting, in 1/2 of a pint of the tears of sorrow. When this potion was prepared and brought to the boy, he was loath to take it, though torn with the gripes, as if he should be pulled in pieces.
Come, come,
said the physician.
You must take it.
It goes against my stomach,
said the boy.
I must have you take it,
said his mother.
I shall vomit it up again,
said the boy.
Pray, sir,
said Christiana to Mr. Skill.
How does it taste?
It has no ill taste,
said the doctor, and with that she touched one of the pills with the tip of her tongue.
Oh, Matthew,
said she,
this potion is sweeter than honey. If thou lovest thy mother, if thou lovest thy brothers, if thou lovest mercy, if thou lovest thy life, take it.
So, with much ado, after a short prayer for the blessing of God upon it, he took it, and it wrought kindly with him. It caused him to purge, it caused him to sleep and rest quietly, it put him into a fine heat and breathing sweat, and did quite rid him of his gripes. So in a little time he got up and walked about with a staff, and would go from room to room, and talk with prudence, piety, and charity of his sickness, and how he was healed. So when the boy was healed, Christiana asked Mr. Skill, saying,
Sir, what will content you for your pains and care to and of my child?
And he said,
You must pay the master of the College of Physicians, according to the rules made in that case and provided.
But, sir,
said she,
what is this pill good for else?
It is an universal pill. It is good against all the diseases that pilgrims are troubled with, and when it is well prepared, it will keep good time out of mind.
Pray, sir, make me up 12 boxes of them, for if I can get these, I will never take another physic.
These pills are good to prevent diseases, as well as to cure when one is sick. Yea, I dare say it, and stand to it, if a man will but use this physic as he should, it will make him live for ever. But, good Christiana, thou must give these pills no other way than as I have prescribed, for if you do, they will do no good.
So he gave unto Christiana physic for herself and her boys, and for mercy, and bid Matthew take heed how he ate any more green plums, and kissed them, and went his way. It was told you before that Prudence bid the boys, if at any time they would, they should ask her some questions that might be profitable, and she would say something to them. Then Matthew, who had been sick, asked her,
Why, for the most part, physic should be bitter to our palates?
To show how unwelcome the word of God and the effects thereof are to a sinful heart.
Why does physic, if it does good, purge and cause that we vomit?
To show that the word, when it works effectually, cleanseth the heart and mind. For look, what the one doth to the body, the other doth to the soul.
What should we learn by seeing the flame of our fire go upwards, and by seeing the beams and sweet influences of the sun strike downwards?
By the going up of the fire we are taught to ascend to heaven by fervent and hot desires, and by the sun's sending his heat, beams, and sweet influences downwards, we are taught that the Saviour of the world, though high, reaches down with his grace and love to us below.
Where have the clouds their water?
Out of the sea.
What may we learn from that?
That ministers should fetch their teaching from God.
Why do they empty themselves upon the earth?
To show that ministers should give out what they know of God to the world.
Why is the rainbow caused by the sun?
To show that the promise of God's grace is made sure to us in Christ.
Why do the springs come from the sea to us through the earth?
To show that the grace of God comes to us through the body of Christ.
Why do some springs rise out of the top of high hills?
To show that the Spirit of grace shall spring up in some that are great and mighty, as well as in many that are poor and low.
Why doth the fire fasten upon the candle wick?
To show that, unless grace doth kindle upon the heart, there will be no true light of light in us.
Why is the wick and tallow and all spent to maintain the light of the candle?
To show that body and soul and all should be at the service of and spend themselves to maintain in good condition that grace of God that is in us.
Why doth the pelican pierce her own breast with her bill?
To nourish her young ones with her blood, and thereby to show that Christ the Blessed so loveth his young, his people, as to save them from death by his blood.
What may one learn by hearing the cock to crow?
Learn to remember Peter's sin and Peter's sorrow. Cock's crowing shows also that day is coming on. Let then the crowing of the cock put thee in mind of that last and terrible day of judgment.
Now about this time their month was out, wherefore they signified to those of the house that it was convenient for them to be up and going. Then said Joseph to his mother,
It is convenient that you forget not to send to the house of Mr. Interpreter to pray him to grant that Mr. Greatheart should be sent unto us, that he may be our conductor the rest of our way.
Good boy,
said she.
I had almost forgot.
So he drew up a petition, and prayed Mr. Watchful the porter to send it by some fit man to her good friend Mr. Interpreter, who, when it was come, and he had seen the contents of the petition, said to the messenger,
Go, and tell them that I will send him.
When the family where Christiana was saw that they had a purpose to go forward, they called the whole house together, to give thanks to their king for sending of them such profitable guests as these. Which done, they said unto Christiana,
And shall we not show thee something, according as our custom is to do to pilgrims, on which thou mayest meditate when thou art upon the way?
So they took Christiana, her children, and Mercy into the closet, and showed them one of the apples that Eve did eat of, and that which she also did give to her husband, and that for the eating of which they were both turned out of paradise, and asked her what she thought that was. Then Christiana said,
It is food or poison, I know not which.
So they opened the matter to her, and she held up her hands and wondered. Then they had her to a place, and showed her Jacob's ladder. Now at that time there were some angels ascending upon it. So Christiana looked and looked to see the angels go up, and so did the rest of the company. Then they were going into another place, to show them something else. But James said to his mother,
Pray bid him stay here a little longer, for this is a curious sight.
So they turned again, and stood feeding their eyes with this so pleasing a prospect. After this they had them into a place where did hang up a golden anchor. So they bid Christiana take it down.
For,
said they,
you shall have it with you, for it is of absolute necessity that you should, that you may lay hold of it within the veil, and stand steadfast, in case you should meet with turbulent weather.
So they were glad thereof. Then they took them, and had them to the mount upon which Abraham our father had offered up Isaac his son, and showed them the altar, the wood, the fire, and the knife, for they remain to be seen to this very day. When they had seen it, they held up their hands, and blessed themselves, and said,
Oh, what a man for love to his master, and for denial to himself, was Abraham.
After they had showed them all these things, Prudence took them into the dining-room, where stood a pair of excellent virginals, So they played upon them, and turned what she had showed them into this excellent song, saying,
Is apple we have shown where you are, that be you aware. You have seen Jacob's ladder too, upon which angels err. An anchor you receive and have, but let not this suffice, until with Abram you have gave your best a sacrifice.
Now about this time one knocked at the door. So the porter opened, and behold, Mr. Greatheart was there. But when he was come in, what joy was there! For it came now fresh again into their minds, how, but a while ago, he had slain old grim bloody man, the giant, and had delivered them from the lions. Then said Mr. Greatheart to Christiana and to Mercy,
My lord has sent each of you a bottle of wine, and also some parched corn, together with a couple of pomegranates. He has also sent the boys some figs and raisins to refresh you in your way.
Then they addressed themselves to their journey, and Prudence and Piety went along with them. When they came at the gate, Christiana asked the porter if any one of late went by. He said,
No, only one some time since, who also told me that of late there had been a great robbery committed on the king's highway as you go. But he saith the thieves are taken, and will shortly be tried for their lives.
Then Christiana and Mercy were afraid, but Matthew said,
Mother, fear nothing as long as Mr. Greatheart is to go with us, and to be our conductor.
Then said Christiana to the porter,
Sir, I am much obliged to you for all the kindnesses that you have shown me since I came hither, and also for that you have been so loving and kind to my children. I know not how to gratify your kindness, wherefore, pray, as a token of my respects to you, accept of this small mite.
So she put a gold angel in his hand, and he made her a low obeisance, and said,
Let thy garments be always white, and let thy head want no ointment. Let Mercy live and not die, and let not her works be few.
And to the boys he said,
Do you flee youthful passions, and follow after godliness with them that are grave and wise, so shall you put gladness into your mother's heart, and obtain praise of all that are sober-minded.
So they thanked the porter, and departed. Now I saw in my dream that they went forward until they came to the brow of a hill, where Piety, bethinking herself, cried out,
Alas! I have forgot what I intended to bestow upon Christiana and her companions. I will go back and fetch it.
So she ran and fetched it. While she was gone, Christiana thought she heard, in a grove a little way off on the right hand, a most curious melodious note, with words much like these.
Through all my life thy favour is so frankly showed to me, that in thy house for evermore my dwelling place shall be.
And listening still, she thought she heard another answer it, saying,
For why the Lord our God is good, his mercy is forever sure, his truth at all times firmly stood, and shall from age to age endure.
So Christiana asked Prudence what it was that made those curious notes.
They are,
said she,
country birds. They sing these notes but seldom, except it be at the spring, when the flowers appear and the sun shines warm, then you may hear them all day long. I often,
said she,
go out to hear them. We also oft-times keep them tame in our house. They are very fine company for us when we are melancholy. Also they make the woods and groves and solitary places desirable to be in.
By this time Piety was come again, so she said to Christiana,
Look here, I have brought thee a plan of all those things that thou hast seen at our house, upon which thou mayest look when thou findest thyself forgetful, and call those things again to remembrance, for thy teaching and comfort.
End of Part 2, Chapter 5. The Pilgrim's Progress, Part 2, Chapter 6. The Pilgrim's Progress, by John Bunyan, Part 2, Chapter 6. The Valley of Humiliation. Now they began to go down the hill into the Valley of Humiliation. It was a steep hill, and the way was slippery, but they were very careful, so they got down pretty well. When they were down in the valley, Piety said to Christiana,
"This is the place where Christian, your husband, met with the foul fiend Apollyon, and where they had that dreadful fight that they had. I know you cannot but have heard thereof, but be of good courage. As long as you have here Mr. Greatheart to be your guide and conductor, we hope you will fare the better."
So when these two had given the pilgrims unto the care of their guide, he went forward, and they went after. Then said Mr. Greatheart,
"We need not be so afraid of this valley, for there is nothing to hurt us, unless we procure it to ourselves. It is true that Christian did here meet with Apollyon, with whom he had also a sore combat, but that fray was the fruit of those slips that he got in his going down the hill, for they that get slips there must look for combats here, and hence it is that this valley has got so hard a name. For the common people, when they hear that some frightful thing has befallen such a one in such a place, are of an opinion that that place is haunted with some foul fiend or evil spirit, when, alas, it is for the fruit of their doing that such things do befall them there. This valley of humiliation is of itself as fruitful a place as any the crow flies over, and I am persuaded, if we could hit upon it, we might find, somewhere hereabouts, something that might give us an account why Christian was so hardly beset in this place."
Then said James to his mother,
"Lo, yonder stands a pillar, and it looks as if something was written thereon. Let us go and see what it is."
So they went, and found there written, that Christian's slips before he came hither, and the battles that he met with in this place, be a warning to those that come after.
"Lo,"
said their guide,
"did I not tell you that there was something hereabouts that would give intimation of the reason why Christian was so hard beset in this place?"
Then, turning himself to Christiana, he said,
"No disgrace to Christian, more than to many others whose hap and loss his was, for it is easier going up than down this hill, and that can be said but of few hills in all these parts of the world. But we will leave the good man, he is at rest. He also had a brave victory over his enemy. Let him that dwelleth above grant that we fare no worse when we come to be tried than he. But we will come again to this valley of humiliation. It is the best and most fruitful piece of ground in all these parts. It is fat ground, and, as you see, consisteth much in meadows. And if a man was to come here in the summer time, as we do now, if he knew not anything before thereof, and if he also delighted himself in the sight of his eyes, he might see that that would be delightful to him. Behold how green this valley is, also how beautified with lilies. I have also known many labouring men who have got good estates in this valley of humiliation. For God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace to the humble. Indeed, it is a very fruitful soil, and doth bring forth by handfuls. Some also have wished that the next way to their father's house were here, and that they might be troubled no more with either hills or mountains to go over. But the way is the way, and there's an end."
Now, as they were going along and talking, they espied a boy feeding his father's sheep. The boy was in very mean clothes, but of a very fresh and well-favoured countenance, and as he sat by himself he sang.
"Hark,"
said Mr. Greatheart,
"to what the shepherd's boy saith."
So they hearkened, and he said,
"He that is down needs to fear no fall, he that is low no pride. He that is humble ever shall have God to be his guide. I am content with what I have, little be it or much. And Lord, contentment still I crave, because thou savest much. Fullness to such a burden is that go on pilgrimage. Here little and hereafter bliss is best from age to age."
Then said their guide,
"Do you hear him? I will dare to say that this boy lives a merrier life, and wears more of that herb called heart's ease in his bosom, than he that is clad in silk and velvet. But we will proceed in our account of this valley. In this valley our Lord formerly had his country house. He loved much to be here. He loved also to walk these meadows, for he found the air was pleasant. Besides, here a man shall be free from the noise and from the hurryings of this life. All states are full of noise and confusion. Only the valley of humiliation is that empty and solitary place. Here a man shall not be so let and hindered in his thoughts as in other places he is apt to be. This is a valley that nobody walks in, but those that love a pilgrim's life. And though Christian had the hard hap to meet here with Apollyon, and to enter with him into a brisk encounter, yet I must tell you that in former times men have met with angels here, have found pearls here, and have in this place found the words of life. Did I say our Lord had here in former days his country house, and that he loved here to walk? I will add, in this place, and to the people that love to tread these grounds, he has left a yearly sum of money to be faithfully paid them at certain seasons, for their support by the way, and for their further encouragement to go on their pilgrimage.
Now, as they went on, Samuel said to Mr. Greatheart,
Sir, I perceive that in this valley my father and Apollyon had their battle. But whereabout was the fight? For I perceive this valley is large.
Your father had that battle with Apollyon at a place yonder before us, in a narrow passage just beyond the forgetful green, and indeed that place is the most dangerous place in all these parts, for if at any time the pilgrims meet with any brunt, it is when they forget what favours they have received, and how unworthy they are of them. This is the place also where others have been hard put to it. But more of the place when we are come to it, for I persuade myself that to this day there remains either some sign of the battle, or some monument to testify that such a battle there was fought.
Then said Mercy,
I think that I am as well in this valley as I have been anywhere else in all our journey. The place, methinks, suits with my spirit. I love to be in such places, where there is no rattling with coaches nor rumbling with wheels. Methinks here one may, without much trouble, be thinking what he is, whence he came, what he has done, and to what the king has called him. Here one may think and break at heart, and melt one's spirit, until one's eyes become like fish pools in Heshbon. They that go rightly through this valley of Baca make it a well, the rain that God sends down from heaven upon them, that are here also filleth the pools. This valley is that from whence also the king will give to his their vineyards, and they that go through it shall sing, as Christian did, for all he met with Apollyon.
'Tis true,
said their guide.
I have gone through this valley many a time, and never was better than when here. I have also been a conductor to several pilgrims, and they have confessed the same. To this man I will look, saith the king, even to him that is poor and of a contrite spirit, and that trembleth at my word.
Now they were come to a place where the aforementioned battle was fought. Then said the guide to Christiana, her children, and Mercy,
This is the place. On this ground Christian stood, and up there came Apollyon against him. And look, did I not tell you, here is some of your husband's blood upon these stones to this day. Behold also how here and there are yet to be seen upon the place some of the shivers of Apollion's broken darts. See also how they did beat the ground with their feet as they fought, to make good their places against each other, how also with their bye-blows they did split the very stones in places. Verily, Christian did here play the man, and showed himself as stout as could. Had he been there, even Hercules himself. When Apollyon was beat, he made his retreat to the next valley, that is called the Valley of the Shadow of Death, unto which we shall come soon. Lo, yonder also stands a monument, on which is engraven this battle, and Christian's victory, to his fame throughout all ages.
So, because it stood just on the wayside before them, they stepped to it, and read the writing, which word for word was this: "Hard by here was a battle fought, most strange and yet most true. Christian and Apollyon sought each other to subdue. The man so bravely played the man, he made the fiend to fly, of which a monument I stand, the same to testify." When they had passed by this place, they came upon the borders of the shadow of death. This valley was longer than the other, a place almost strangely haunted with evil things, as many are able to testify. But these women and children went the better through it because they had daylight, and because Mr. Greatheart was their conductor. When they were entered upon this valley, they thought they heard a groaning, as of dead men, a very great groaning. They thought also that they did hear words of moaning spoken, as of some extreme torment. These things made the boys to quake. The women also looked pale and wan, but their guide bid them be of good comfort. So they went on a little farther, and they thought that they felt the ground begin to shake under them, as if some hollow place was there. They heard also a kind of hissing, as of serpents, but nothing as yet appeared. Then said the boys,
"Are we not yet at the end of this doleful place?"
But the guide also bid them be of good courage, and look well to their feet.
"Lest haply,"
said he,
"you be taken in some snare."
Now James began to be sick, but I think the cause thereof was fear. So his mother gave him some of that glass of spirits that had been given her at the interpreter's house, and 3 of the pills that Mr. Skill had prepared, and the boy began to revive. Thus they went on, till they came to about the middle of the valley, and then Christiana said,
"Methinks I see something yonder upon the road before us, a thing of such a shape as I have not seen."
Then said Joseph,
"Mother, what is it?"
"An ugly thing, child, an ugly thing,"
said she.
"But, mother, what is it like?"
said he.
"'Tis like I cannot tell what,"
said she.
"and now it is but a little way off."
Then said she,
"It is night."
"Well, well,"
said Mr. Greatheart,
"let them that are most afraid keep close to me."
So the fiend came on, and the conductor met it, but when it was just come to him, it vanished to all their sights. Then remembered they what had been said some time ago, "Resist the devil, and he will flee from you." They went therefore on, as being a little refreshed, but they had not gone far before Mercy, looking behind her, saw, as she thought, something most like a lion, and it came a great padding pace after, and it had a hollow voice of roaring, and at every roar that it gave, it made all the valley echo, and all their hearts to ache, save the heart of him that was their guide. So it came up, and Mr. Greatheart went behind, and put the pilgrims all before him. The lion also came on apace, and Mr. Greatheart addressed himself to give him battle. But when he saw that it was determined that resistance should be made, he also drew back, and came no farther. They then went on again, and their conductor did go before them, till they came to a place where was cast up a pit the whole breadth of the way, and before they could be prepared to go over that, a great mist and darkness fell upon them, so that they could not see. Then said the pilgrims,
"Alas, what now shall we do?"
But their guide made answer,
"Fear not, stand still, and see what an end will be put to this also."
So they stayed there, because their path was marred. They then also thought that they did hear more apparently the noise and rushing of the enemies. The fire also, and the smoke of the pit, were much easier to be discerned. Then said Christiana to Mercy,
"Now I see what my poor husband went through. I have heard much of this place, but I never was here before now. Poor man! He went here all alone in the night. He had night almost quite through the way. Also these fiends were busy about him, as if they would have torn him in pieces. Many have spoken of it, but none can tell what the valley of the shadow of death should mean, until they come in it themselves. The heart knoweth its own bitterness, and a stranger intermeddleth not with its joy. To be here is a fearful thing."
This is like doing business in great waters, or like going down into the deep. This is like being in the heart of the sea, and like going down to the bottoms of the mountains. Now it seems as if the earth, with its bars, were about us forever. But let them that walk in darkness, and have no light, trust in the name of the Lord, and stay upon their God. For my part, as I have told you already, I have gone often through this valley, and have been much harder put to it than now I am, and yet, you see, I am alive. I would not boast, for that I am not mine own Saviour, but I trust we shall have a good deliverance. Come, let us pray for light to him that can lighten our darkness, and that can rebuke not only these, but all of the Satans in hell.
So they cried and prayed, and God sent light and deliverance, for there was now no hindrance in their way, no, not there where but now they were stopped with a pit. Yet they were not got through the valley, so they went on still, and behold, great stinks and loathsome smells, to the great annoyance of them. Then said Mercy to Christiana,
It is not so pleasant being here as at the gate, or at the interpreter's, or at the house where we lay last.
Oh, but,
said one of the boys,
it is not so bad to go through here as it is to abide here always. And, for all I know, one reason why we must go this way to the house prepared for us is that our home might be made the sweeter to us.
Well said, Samuel,
quoth the guide.
Thou hast now spoke like a man.
Why, if ever I get out here again,
said the boy,
I think I shall prize light, and a good way better than I did in all my life.
Then said the guide,
We shall be out by and by.
So on they went, and Joseph said,
Can't we see to the end of this valley as yet?
Then said the guide,
Look to your feet, for we shall presently be among the snares.
So they looked to their feet and went on, but they were troubled much with the snares. Now when they were come among the snares, they espied a man cast into the ditch on the left hand, with his flesh all rent and torn. Then said the guide,
That is one heedless, that was going this way. He has lain there a great while. There was one take heed with him when he was taken and slain, but he escaped their hands. You cannot imagine how many are killed hereabouts, and yet men are so foolishly venturous as to set out lightly on pilgrimage, and to come without a guide. Poor Christian, it is a wonder that he here escaped. But he was beloved of his God. Also he had a good heart of his own, or else he could never have done it.
Now they drew towards the end of the way, and just where Christian had seen the cave when he went by, out thence came forth Maul, a giant. This Maul did use to spoil young pilgrims by deceiving them, and he called Greatheart by his name, and said unto him,
How many times have you been forbidden to do these things?
Then said Greatheart,
What things?
What things?
Quoth the giant.
You know what things, but I will put an end to your trade.
But pray,
said Mr. Greatheart,
before we fall to it, let us understand wherefore we must fight.
Now the women and children stood trembling, and knew not what to do. Quoth the giant,
You rob the country, and rub it with the worst of thefts.
These are but random words,
said Mr. Greatheart.
Tell what robberies I have done, man.
Then said the giant,
Thou practisest the craft of a kidnapper. Thou gatherest up women and children, and carriest them into a strange country, to the weakening of my master's kingdom.
But now Greatheart replied,
I am a servant of the God of heaven. My business is to persuade sinners to turn to God. I am commanded to do my best to turn men, women, and children from darkness to light, and from the power of Satan unto God. And if this be indeed the ground of thy quarrel, let us fall to it as soon as thou wilt.
Then the giant came up, and Mr. Greatheart went to meet him, and as he went he drew his sword, but the giant had a club. So without more ado they fell to it, and at the first blow the giant struck Mr. Greatheart down upon one of his knees. With that the women and children cried out, So Mr. Greatheart, recovering himself, laid about him in full lusty manner, and gave the giant a wound in his arm. Thus he fought for the space of an hour, to that height of heat that the breath came out of the giant's nostrils as the heat doth out of a boiling cauldron. Then they sat down to rest them, but Mr. Greatheart betook himself to prayer. Also the women and children did nothing but sigh and cry all the time that the battle did last. When they had rested them, and taken breath, they both fell to it again, and Mr. Greatheart with a blow fetched the giant down to the ground.
Nay, hold, and let me recover,
quoth he. So Mr. Greatheart fairly let him get up. So to it they went again, and the giant missed but little of breaking Mr. Greatheart's skull with his club. Mr. Greatheart, seeing that, runs to him in the full heat of his spirit, and pierces him under the 5th rib. With that the giant began to faint, and could hold up his club no longer. Then Mr. Greatheart seconded his blow, and smote the head of the giant from his shoulders. Then the women and children rejoiced, and Mr. Greatheart also praised God for the deliverance he had wrought. When this was done, they amongst them erected a pillar, and fastened the giant's head thereon, and wrote under it, in letters that passengers might read,
He that did bear this head was one that pilgrims did misuse. He stopped their way, he spared none, but did them all abuse. Until that I, Greatheart, arose, the pilgrim's guide to be, until that I did him oppose, that was their enemy.
Now I saw that they went to the high ground that was a little way off, cast up to be a prospect for pilgrims. That was the place from whence Christiana had the first sight of Faithful his brother. Wherefore here they sat down and rested. They also here did eat and drink and make merry, for that they had gotten deliverance from this so dangerous an enemy. As they sat thus and did eat, Christiana asked the guide if he had caught no hurt in the battle. Then said Mr. Greatheart,
No, save a little on my flesh, yet that also shall be so far from being to my harm, that it is at present a proof of my love to my master and you, and shall be a means, by grace, to increase my reward at last.
But were you not afraid, good sir, when you saw him come out with his club?
It is my duty,
said he,
to mistrust my own ability, that I may have trust in him who is stronger than all.
But what did you think when he fetched you down to the ground at the first blow?
Why, I thought,
replied he,
that so my master himself was served, and yet he it was that conquered at the last.
When you have all thought what you please, I think God has been wonderful good unto us, both in bringing us out of this valley, and in delivering us out of the hand of this enemy. For my part, I see no reason why we should distrust our God any more, since he has now, and in such a place as this, given us such a proof of his love as this.
Then they got up and went forward. Now a little before them stood an oak, and under it, when they came to it, they found an old pilgrim fast asleep. They knew that he was a pilgrim by his clothes and his staff and his girdle. So the guide, Mr. Greatheart, awaked him, and the old gentleman, as he lifted up his eyes, cried out,
What's the matter? What are you, and what is your business here?
Come, man, be not so hot. Here are none but friends.
Yet the old man gets up, and stands upon his guard, and will know of them what they are. Then said the guide,
My name is Greatheart. I am the guide of these pilgrims that are going to the celestial country.
Then said Mr. Honest,
I cry you mercy. I fear that you had been of the company of those that some time ago did rob Little Faith of his money. But now I look better about me, I perceive you are honester people.
Why, what would or could you have done to have helped yourself, if we indeed had been of that company?
Done. Why, I would have fought as long as breath had been in me, and had I so done, I am sure you could never have given me the worst on it, for a Christian can never be overcome unless he shall yield of himself.
Well said, Father Honest,
quoth the guide.
For by this I know thou art a cock of the right kind, for thou hast said the truth.
And by this also I know that thou knowest what true pilgrimage is, for all others do think that we are the soonest overcome of any.
Well, now we are so happily met, pray let me crave your name, and the name of the place you came from.
My name I cannot, but I come from the town of Stupidity. It lieth about 4 degrees beyond the city of Destruction.
Oh, are you that countryman? Then I deem I have half a guess of you. Your name is Old Honesty, is it not?
So the old gentleman blushed, and said,
Not Honesty, but Honest is my name, and I wish that my nature may agree to what I am called. But, sir,
said the old gentleman,
how could you guess that I am such a man, since I came from such a place?
I had heard of you before by my master, for he knows all things that are done on the earth. But I have often wondered that any should come from your place, for your town is worse than the city of destruction itself.
Yes, we lie more off from the sun, and so are more cold and senseless. But were a man in a mountain of ice, yet if the sun of righteousness should rise upon him, his frozen heart shall feel a thaw, and thus it hath been with me.
I believe it, Father Honest, I believe it, for I know the thing is true.
Then the old gentleman saluted all the pilgrims with a holy kiss of love, and asked them their names, and how they had fared since they had set out on their pilgrimage. Then said Christiana,
My name I suppose you have heard of. Good Christian was my husband, and these are his children.
But can you think how the old gentleman was taken when she told him who she was? He skipped, he smiled, he blessed them with 1,000 good wishes, saying,
I've heard much of your husband, and of his travels and wars which he underwent in his days. Be it spoken to your comfort, the name of your husband rings all over these parts of the world. His faith, his courage, his enduring, and his sincerity under all, have made his name famous.
Then he turned him to the boys, and asked of them their names, which they told him. Then he said unto them,
Matthew, be thou like Matthew the publican, not in vice, but in virtue. Samuel,
said he,
be thou like Samuel the prophet, a man of faith and prayer. Joseph,
said he,
be thou like Joseph in Potiphar's house, pure, and one that flees from temptation. And James, be thou like James the just, and like James the brother of our Lord.
Then they told him of Mercy, and how she had left her town and her kindred to come along with Christiana and with her sons. At that the old honest man said,
Mercy is thy name. By mercy shalt thou be sustained and carried through all those difficulties that shall attack thee in thy way, till thou shalt come thither to where thou shalt look the fountain of mercy in the face with comfort.
All this while the guide, Mr. Greatheart, was very well pleased, and smiled upon his companion. Now, as they walked along together, the guide asked the old gentleman if he did not know one Mr. Fearing, that came on pilgrimage out of his parts.
Yes, very well,
said he.
He was a man that had the root of the matter in him, but he was one of the most troublesome pilgrims that I ever met with in all my days.
I perceive you knew him, for you have given a very right character of him.
Knew him? I was a great companion of his. I was with him most an end. When he first began to think upon what would come upon us hereafter, I was with him.
I was his guide from my master's house to the gates of the celestial city.
Then you knew him to be a troublesome one?
I did so, but I could very well bear it, for men of my calling are oftentimes entrusted with the conduct of such as he was.
Well then, pray let us hear a little of him, and how he managed himself under your conduct.
Why, he was always afraid that he should come short of whither he had a desire to go. Everything frightened him that he heard anybody speak of, if it had but the least appearance of opposition in it. I hear that he lay roaring at the slough of Despond for above a month together. Nor durst he, for all he saw several go over before him, venture, though they, many of them, offered to lend him their hand. He would not go back again, neither. The celestial city, he said, he should die if he came not to it, and yet was discouraged at every difficulty, and stumbled at every straw that anybody cast in his way. Well, after he had lain at the slough of despond a great while, as I have told you, one sunshine morning, I don't know how, he ventured, and so got over. But when he was over, he would scarce believe it. He had, I think, a slough of despond in his mind, a slough that he carried everywhere with him, or else he could never have been as he was. So he came up to the gate, you know what I mean, that stands at the head of this way. And here also he stood a good while before he would venture to knock. When the gate was opened, he would give back, and give place to others, and say that he was not worthy, for all he got before sun to the gate, yet many of them went in before him. There the poor man would stand shaking and shrinking. I dare say it would have pitied one's heart to have seen him, nor would he go back again. At last he took the hammer that hanged on the gate in his hand, and gave a small rap or two. Then one opened to him, but he shrank back as before. He that opened stepped out after him, and said, "Thou trembling one, what wantest thou?" With that he fell down to the ground. He that spoke to him wondered to see him so faint, so he said to him, "Peace be to thee, up, for I have set open the door to thee. Come in, for thou art blessed." With that he got up and went in, trembling. And when he was in, he was ashamed to show his face. Well, after he had been entertained there for a while, as you know how the manner is, he was bid go on his way, and also told the way he should take. So he came till he came to our house. But as he behaved himself as the gate, so he did at my master the interpreter's door. He lay there about in the cold a good while before he would venture to call. Yet he would not go back, and the nights were long and cold then. Nay, he had a note of need in his bosom to my master, to receive him, and grant him the comfort of his house, and also to allow him a stout and valiant conductor, because he was himself so chicken-hearted a man, and yet for all that he was afraid to call at the door. So he lay up and down thereabouts, till, poor man, he was almost starved, yea, so great was his fear, though he had seen several others for knocking get in, yet he was afraid to venture. At last I think I looked out of the window, and perceiving a man to be up and down about the door, I went out to him, and asked what he was. But, poor man, the water stood in his eyes, so I perceived what he wanted. I went therefore in, and told it in the house, and we showed the things to our Lord, and he sent me out again, to entreat him to come in. But I dare say I had hard work to do it. At last he came in, and I will say that for my Lord he carried it wonderfully loving to him. There were but few good bits at the table, but some of it was laid upon his trencher. Then he presented the note, and my Lord looked thereon, and said his desire should be granted. So, when he had been there a good while, he seemed to get some heart, and to be a little more comfortable. For my master, you must know, is one of very tender heart, specially to them that are afraid, wherefore he carried it so towards him, as might tend most to his encouragement. Well, when he had a sight of the things of the place, and was ready to take his journey to go to the city, my Lord, as he did to Christian before, gave him a bottle of spirits, and some comfortable things to eat. Thus we set forward, and I went before him, but the man was but of few words, only he would sigh aloud. When we were come to the place where the 3 fellows were hanged, he said that he doubted that that would be his end also. Also he seemed glad when he saw the cross and the sepulchre. There, I confess, he desired to stay a little to look, and he seemed, for a little while after, to be a little cheery. When we came to the hill difficulty, he made no stick at that, nor did he much fear the lions, for you must know that his trouble was not about such things as those. His fear was about his acceptance at last. I got him in at the House Beautiful, I think, before he was willing. Also, when he was in, I brought him acquainted with the damsels that were of the place. but he was ashamed to make himself much for company. He desired much to be alone, yet he always loved good talk, and often would get behind the screen to hear it. He also loved much to see ancient things, and to be pondering them in his mind. He told me afterwards that he loved to be in those two houses from which he came last, to wit, at the gate, and that of the interpreter, but that he durst not be so bold as to ask. When we went also from the House Beautiful down the hill into the Valley of Humiliation, he went down as well as ever I saw a man in my life, for he cared not how mean he was, so he might be happy at last. Yea, I think there was a kind of sympathy betwixt that valley and him, for I never saw him better in all his pilgrimage than when he was in that valley. Here he would lie down, embrace the ground, and kiss the very flowers that grew in this valley. He would now be up every morning by break of day, tracing and walking to and fro in this valley. But when he was come to the entrance of the valley of the shadow of death, I thought I should have lost my man, not for that he had any inclination to go back. That he always abhorred, but he was ready to die for fear. "Oh, the hobgoblins will have me, the hobgoblins will have me," cried he, and I could not beat him out of it. He made such a noise and such an outcry here that, had they but heard him, it was enough to encourage them to come and fall upon us. But this I took very great notice of, that the valley was as quiet when we went through it as ever I knew it before or since. I suppose those enemies here had now a special check from our Lord, and a command not to meddle until Mr. Fearing had passed over it. It would be too tedious to tell you of all. I will therefore only mention a passage or two more. When he was come at Vanity Fair, I thought he would have fought with all the men in the fair. I feared there we should have both been knocked on the head, so hot was he against their fooleries. Upon the enchanted ground he was also very wakeful, but when he was come at the river, where there was no bridge, there again he was in a heavy case. Now, he said, he should be drowned for ever, and so never see that face with comfort that he had come so many miles to behold. And here also I took notice of what was very remarkable. The water of that river was lower at this time than ever I saw it in all my life. So he went over at last, not much above wet-shod. When he was going up to the gate, I began to take leave of him, and to wish him a good reception above. So he said, I shall. Then parted we asunder, and I saw him no more.
Then it seems he was well at last.
Yes, I never had a doubt about him. He was a man of choice spirit, only he was always kept very low, and that made his life so burthensome to himself and so troublesome to others. He was above many tender of sin. He was so afraid of doing injuries to others, that he often would deny himself of that which was lawful, because he would not offend.
But what should be the reason that such a good man should be all his days so much in the dark?
There are two sorts of reasons for it. One is, the wise God will have it so. Some must pipe, and some must weep. Now Mr. Fearing was one that played upon the bass. He and his fellows sound the sackbut, whose notes are more doleful than the notes of other music are, though indeed some say the bass is the ground of music. And for my part I care not at all for that profession which begins not in heaviness of mind. The first string that the musician usually touches is the bass, when he intends to put all in tune. God only plays upon this string first, when he sets the soul in tune for himself. Only here was the imperfection of Mr. Fearing. He could play upon no other music but this, till toward his latter end. I make bold to talk thus in figures, for the ripening of the wits of young readers, and because, in the book of the Revelation, the saved are compared to a company of musicians that play upon their trumpets and harps, and sing their songs before the throne.
He was a very zealous man, as one may see by the relation of which you have given of him. Difficulties, lions, or Vanity Fair he feared not at all. It was only sin, death, and hell that were to give him a terror, because he had some doubts about his interest in that celestial country.
You say right. Those were the things that were his troublers, and they, as you have well observed, arose from the weakness of his mind thereabout, not from the weakness of spirit, as to the practical part of a pilgrim's life. I dare believe that, as the proverb is, he would have bit a firebrand had it stood in his way, but the things with which he was oppressed no man ever yet could shake off with ease.
Then said Christiana,
This relation of Mr. Fearing has done me good. I thought nobody had been like me, but I see there was some semblance betwixt this good man and I, only we differed in two things. His troubles were so great that they broke out, but mine I kept within. His also lay so hard upon him, they made him that he could not knock at the houses provided for entertainment, but my trouble was always such as made me knock the louder.
If I might also speak my heart, I must say that something of him has also dwelt in me, for I have ever been more afraid of the lake and the loss of a place in paradise than I have been of the loss of other things. Oh, thought I, may I have the happiness to have a habitation there. It is enough, though I part with all the world to win it.
Then said Matthew,
Fear was one thing that made me think that I was far from having that within me which makes me sure of being saved. But if it were so with such a good man as he, why may it not also go well with me?
No fears, no grace.
said James.
Though there is not always grace when there is fear of hell. Yet to be sure, there is no grace where there is no fear of God.
Well said, James, thou hast hit the mark. For the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, and, to be sure, they that want the beginning have neither middle nor end. But we will here conclude our discourse of Mr. Fearing, after we have sent after him this farewell. Well, Master Fearing, thou didst fear thy God, and wast afraid of doing anything while here, that would have thee betrayed. And didst thou fear the lake and pit? Would others did so too, for as for them that want thy wit, they do themselves undo.
Now I saw that they were still on in their talk, for after Mr. Greatheart had made an end with Mr. Fearing, Mr. Honest began to tell them of another, but his name was Mr. Self-will.
He pretended himself to be a pilgrim,
said Mr. Honest.
But I persuade myself he never came in at the gate that stands at the head of the way.
Had you ever any talk with him about it?
Yes, more than once or twice, but he would always be like himself, self-willed. He would neither cared for man, nor argument, nor yet example. What his mind prompted him to do, that he would do, and nothing else could he be got to do.
Pray, what principles did he hold? For I suppose you can tell.
He held that a man might follow the sins as well as the virtues of pilgrims, and that, if he did both, he should certainly be saved.
How? If he had said it is possible for the best to be guilty of the vices, as well as to partake of the virtues of pilgrims, he could not much have been blamed. For indeed we are free from no sin absolutely, but on condition that we watch and strive. But this, I perceive, is not the thing. But if I understand you right, your meaning is that he was of opinion that it was allowable so to be.
Aye, so I mean, and so he believed and acted.
But what grounds had he for his so saying?
Why, he said he had the Scripture for his warrant.
Prithee, Mr. Honest, present us with a few particulars.
So I will. He said, to have to do with other men's wives had been practised by David, God's beloved, and therefore he could do it. He said, to have more women than one was a thing that Solomon practised, and therefore he could do it. He said that Sarah lied, and so did Rahab, and therefore he could do it. He said that the disciples went at the bidding of their master, and took away the owner's ass, and therefore he could do so too. He said that Jacob got the inheritance of his father in a way of guile and cheating, and therefore he could do so too.
Highly base indeed. And you are sure he was of this opinion?
I have heard him plead for it, bring Scripture for it, bring argument for it, and so on.
An opinion that is not fit to be with any allowance in the world.
You must understand me rightly. He did not say that any man might do this, but that they who had the virtues of those that did such things might also do the same.
But what more false than such a conclusion? For this is as much as to say that because good men hitherto have sinned through weakness or forgetfulness, therefore he had an allowance to do it of a purpose, or if, because a child, by the blast of the wind, or for that it stumbled at a stone, fell down and defiled itself in the mire, therefore he might wilfully lie down and wallow like a boar therein. Who could have thought that anyone could so far have been blinded by the power of sin? But what is written must be true. They stumble at the word, being disobedient, whereunto also they were appointed. His supposing that such may have the godly man's virtues, who accustom themselves to their vices, is also a delusion as strong as the other. To eat up the sin of God's people, as a dog licks up filth, is no sign of one that is possessed with their virtues. Nor can I believe that one who is of this opinion can have faith or love in him. But I know you have made strong objections against him. Prithee, what can he say for himself?
Why, he says, to do this openly and by way of opinion seems abundantly more honest than to do it, and yet hold contrary to it in opinion.
A very wicked answer. For though to let loose the bridle to lusts, while our opinions are against such thing, is bad, yet to sin, and plead a toleration so to do, is worse. The one stumbles beholders accidentally, the other pleads them into the snare.
There are many of this man's mind that have not this man's mouth, and that makes going on pilgrimage of so little esteem as it is.
You have said the truth, and it is to be lamented, but he that feareth the King of Paradise shall come out of them all.
There are strange opinions in the world. I know one that said it was time enough to turn from sin when they come to die.
Such are not overwise. That man would have been loath, might he have had a week to run 20 miles in for his life, to have deferred that journey to the last hour of that week.
You say right, and yet the most of them who count themselves pilgrims do indeed do thus. I am, as you see, an old man, and have been a traveller in this road many a day, and I have taken notice of many things. I have seen some that have set out as if they would drive all the world afore them, who yet have, in a few days, died as they in the wilderness, and so never got sight of the promised land. I have seen some that have promised nothing at first, setting out to be pilgrims, and that one would have thought could not have lived a day, that have yet proved very good pilgrims. I have seen some that have run hastily forward, that again have, after a little time, run just as fast back again. I have seen some who have spoken very well of a pilgrim's life at first, that, after a while, have spoken as much against it. I have heard some, when they first set out for paradise, say positively that there is such a place, who, when they have been almost there, have come back again, and said there is none. I have heard some boast what they would do in case they should be opposed, that have, even at a false alarm, fled faith, the pilgrim's way, and all.
Now, as they were thus in their way, there came one running to meet them, and said, Gentlemen, and you of the weaker sort, if you love life, shift for yourselves, for the robbers are before you.
They be the three that set upon little faith hitherto. Well,
said he,
we are ready for them.
So they went on their way. Now they looked at every turning when they should have met with the villains, but whether they heard of Mr. Greatheart, or whether they had some other game, they came not up to the Pilgrims. End of Part 2, Chapter 6. The Pilgrim's Progress, Part 2, Chapter 7. The Pilgrim's Progress, by John Bunyan, Part 2, Chapter 7. Entertained by Gaius. Christiana then wished for an inn for herself and her children, because they were weary. Then said Mr. Honest,
There is one a little before us, where a very honourable disciple, one Gaius, dwells.
So they all concluded to turn in thither, and the rather because the old gentleman gave him so good a report. When they came to the door, they went in, not knocking, for folks used not to knock at the door of an inn. Then they called for the master of the house, and he came to them. So they asked if they might lie there that night.
Yes, gentlemen, if you be true men, for my house is for none but pilgrims.
Then were Christiana, Mercy, and the boys the more glad, for that the innkeeper was a lover of pilgrims. So they called for rooms, and he showed them one for Christiana and her children and Mercy, and another for Greatheart and the old gentleman.
Good Gaius, what hast thou for supper? For these pilgrims have come far to-day, and are weary.
It is late, so we could not conveniently go out to seek food, but such as we have you shall be welcome to, if that will content.
We will be content with what thou hast in the house, for as much as I have proved thee, thou art never without that which is suitable.
Then he went down and spake to the cook, whose name was Taste that which is good, to get ready supper for so many pilgrims. This done, he came up again, saying,
Come, my good friends, you are welcome to me, and I am glad that I have a house to entertain you in. And while supper is making ready, if you please, let us entertain one another with some good talking together.
So they all said,
Content.
Whose wife is this aged matron, and whose daughter is this young damsel?
The woman is the wife of one Christian, a pilgrim of former times, and these are his 4 children. The maid is one of her acquaintance, one that she hath persuaded to come with her on pilgrimage. The boys take all after their father, and wish to tread in his steps. Yea, if they do but see any place where the old pilgrim hath lain, or any print of his foot, it bringeth joy to their hearts, and they are eager to lie or tread in the same.
Is this Christian's wife, and are these Christian's children? I knew your husband's father, yea, also his father's father. Many have been good of this stock. Their ancestors dwelt first at Antioch. Christian's ancestors, the early fathers from whom he came, I suppose you have heard your husband talk of them, were very worthy men. They have, above any that I know, showed themselves men of great virtue and courage, for the Lord of Pilgrims, his ways, and them that loved him. I have heard of many of your husband's relations, that have stood all trials for the sake of the truth. Stephen, who was one of the first of the family from whence your husband sprang, was knocked on the head with stones. James, another of this generation, was slain with the edge of the sword. To say nothing of Peter and Paul, men anciently of the family from whence your husband came, there was Ignatius, who was cast to the lions, Romanus, whose flesh was cut by pieces from his bones, and Polycarp, that played the man in the fire. There was he that was hanged up in a basket in the sun for the wasps to eat, and he whom they put into a sack and cast him into the sea to be drowned. It would be utterly impossible to count up all of that family who have suffered injuries and death for the love of a pilgrim's life, nor can I but be glad to see that thy husband has left behind him 4 such boys as these. I hope they will bear out their father's name, and tread in their father's steps, and come to their father's end.
Indeed, sir, they are likely lads. They seem to choose heartily their father's ways.
That is it that I said. Wherefore Christian's family is like still to spread abroad upon the face of the ground, and yet to be numerous upon the face of the earth. Wherefore let Christiana look out some damsels for her sons, to whom they may be married, etc., that the name of their father and the house of his family may never be forgotten in the world.
'Tis pity this family should fall and die out of the world.
Fall it cannot, but be diminished it may. But let Christiana take my advice, and that is the way to uphold it. And Christiana,
said this innkeeper,
I am glad to see thee and thy friend Mercy together here, a lovely couple, and may I advise, take Mercy into a nearer relation to thee. If she will, let her be given to Matthew, thy eldest son. It is the way to give you a family in the earth.
So this match was arranged, and in process of time they were married. But more of that hereafter. Gaius also proceeded, and said,
I will now speak on the behalf of women, to take away their reproach. For as death and the curse came into the world by a woman, so also did life and health. God sent forth his Son, born of a woman. I will say again, that when the Saviour was come, women rejoiced in him before either man or angel. I read not that man ever gave unto Christ so much as 1 penny, but the women followed him, and ministered to him of their substance. 'Twas a woman that washed his feet with tears, and a woman that anointed his body to the burial. There were women that wept when he was going to the cross, and women that followed him from the cross, and that sat over against the sepulchre when he was buried. There were women that were first with him at his resurrection morn, and women that brought tidings first to his disciples that he was risen from the dead. Women therefore are highly favoured, and show by these things that they are sharers with us in the grace of life.
Now the cook sent up to signify that supper was almost ready, and sent one to lay the cloth, the dishes, and to set the salt and bread in order. Then said Matthew,
The sight of this cloth and of this forerunner of the supper awaketh in me a greater appetite to my food than I had before.
So let all teaching truth to thee in this life awaken in thee a greater desire to sit at the supper of the great King in his kingdom. For all preaching, books, and services here are but as the laying of dishes, and as setting of salt upon the board, when compared with the feast which our Lord will make for us when we come to his house.
So supper came up, and first a heave-shoulder and a wave-breast were set on the table before them, to show that they must begin their meal with prayer and praise to God. The heave-shoulder David lifted up his heart to God with, and with the wave-breast, where his heart lay, he used to lean upon his harp when he played. These 2 dishes were very fresh and good, and they all ate heartily well thereof. The next they brought up was a bottle of wine, red as blood. So Gaius said to them,
Drink freely. This is the true juice of the vine, that makes glad the heart of God and man.
So they drank and were merry. The next was a dish of milk, well crumbed. But Gaius said,
Let the boys have that they may grow thereby.
Then they brought up in course a dish of butter and honey. Then said Gaius,
Eat freely of this, for this is good to cheer up and strengthen your judgments and understandings. This was our Lord's dish when he was a child. Butter and honey shall he eat, that he may know to refuse the evil and choose the good.
Then they brought them a dish of apples, and they were very good-tasted fruit. Then said Matthew,
May we eat apples, since they were such bine with which the serpent deceived our first mother Eve?
Then said Gaius,
Apples were they with which we were beguiled. Yet sin, not apples, hath our souls defiled. Apples forbid, if ate, corrupt the blood. To eat such, when commanded, does us good. Drink of his flagons then, thou church, his dove, and eat his apples, who are sick of love.
Then said Matthew,
I made the objection because I a while since was sick with eating of fruit.
Forbidden fruit will make you sick, but not what our Lord has allowed.
While they were thus talking, they were presented with another dish, and it was a dish of nuts. Then said some at the table,
Nuts spoil tender teeth, especially the teeth of children.
Which when Gaius heard, he said,
Hard texts are nuts, I will not call them cheaters, whose shells do keep their kernels from the eaters. Ope then the shells, and you shall have the meat. They here are brought for you to crack and eat.
Then they were very merry, and sat at the table a long time, talking of many things. Then said the old gentleman,
My good landlord, while we were cracking your nuts, if you please, do you open this riddle. A man there was, though some did count him mad, the more he cast away, the more he had.
Then they all gave good heed, wondering what good Gaius would say. So he sat still a while, and then thus replied,
He that bestows his goods upon the poor shall have as much again, and 10 times more.
Then said Joseph,
I dare say, sir, I do not think you could have found it out.
Oh,
said Gaius.
I have been trained up in this way a great while. Nothing teaches like experience. I have learned of my lord to be kind, and have found by experience that I have gained thereby. There is that scattereth and yet increaseth, and there is that withholdeth more than is meet, but it tendeth to poverty. There is that maketh himself rich, yet hath nothing. There is that maketh himself poor, yet hath great riches.
Then Samuel whispered to Christiana his mother, and said,
Mother, this is a very good man's house. Let us stay here a good while, and let my brother Matthew be married here to Mercy before we go any farther.
The which Gaius, the host, overhearing, said,
With a very good will, my child.
So they stayed there more than a month, and Mercy was given to Matthew to wife. While they stayed there, Mercy, as her custom was, would be making coats and garments to give to the poor, by which she brought up a very good report upon the pilgrims. But to return again to our story, after supper the lads desired a bed, for that they were weary with travelling. Then Gaius called to show them their chamber, but, said Mercy,
I will have them to bed.
So she had them to bed, and they slept well. But the rest sat up all night, for Gaius and they were such suitable company that they could not tell how to part. Then, after much talk of their lord, themselves, and their journey, old Mr. Honest, he that put forth the riddle to Gaius, began to nod. Then said Greatheart,
What, sir? You begin to be drowsy? Come, rub up. Now, here's a riddle for you.
Then said Mr. Honest,
Let us hear it.
Then said Mr. Greatheart,
He that will kill must first be overcome. Who live abroad would first must die at home.
Ha!
said Mr. Honest.
It is a hard one, hard to explain, and harder to do. But come, landlord,
said he,
I will, if you please, leave my part to you. Do you expound it, and I will hear what you say.
No,
said Gaius.
It was put to you, and it is expected you should answer it.
Then said the old gentleman,
He first by grace must conquered be, that sin would mortify, and who that lives would convince me, unto himself must die.
Thus they sat talking till break of day. Now, when the family were up, Christiana bade her son James read a chapter. So he read the 53rd of Isaiah.
Well,
said Gaius,
now you are here, and since, as I know, Mr. Greatheart is good at his weapons, if you please, after we have refreshed ourselves, we will walk into the fields to see if we can do any good. About a mile from hence there is one Slaygood, a giant, that doth much annoy the king's highway in these parts, and I know whereabout his haunt is. He is master of a number of thieves. 'Twould be well if we could clear these parts of him.
So they consented and went, Mr. Greatheart with his sword, helmet, and shield, and the rest with spears and staves. When they were come to the place where he was, they found him with one feeble-minded in his hands, whom his servants had brought unto him, having taken him in the way. Now the giant was picking his pockets, with a purpose after that to pick his bones, for he was of the nature of flesh-eaters. Well, so soon as they saw Mr. Greatheart and his friends at the mouth of his cave with their weapons, he demanded what they wanted.
We want thee, for we are come to revenge the quarrel of the many that thou hast slain of the pilgrims, when thou hast dragged them out of the king's highway. Wherefore come out of thy cave.
So he armed himself and came out, and to battle they went, and fought for above an hour, and then stood still to take wind. Then said the giant,
Why are you here, on my ground?
To revenge the blood of pilgrims, as I told thee before.
So they went to it again, and the giant made Mr. Greatheart give back. But he came up again, and in the greatness of his mind he let fly with such stoutness at the giant's head and sides, that he made him let his weapon fall out of his hand. So he smote him, and slew him, and cut off his head, and brought it away to the inn. He also took Feeble-mind, the pilgrim, and brought him with him to his lodgings. When they were come home, they showed his head to the family, and then set it up as they had done others before, for a terror to those that should attempt to do as he hereafter. Then they asked Mr. Feeble-mind how he fell into his hands. Then said the poor man,
I am a sickly man, as you can see, and because death did usually once a day knock at my door, I thought I should never be well at home. So I betook myself to a pilgrim's life, and have travelled hither from the town of Uncertain, where I and my father were born. I am a man of no strength at all of body, nor yet of mind, but would, if I could, though I can but crawl, spend my life in the pilgrim's way. When I came at the gate that is at the head of the way, the lord of that place did entertain me freely, neither objected he against my weakly looks, nor against my feeble mind, but gave me such things as were necessary for my journey, and bid me hope to the end. When I came to the house of the interpreter, I received much kindness there, and because the hill difficulty was judged too hard for me, I was carried up that one by one of his servants. Indeed, I have found much relief from pilgrims. Though none were willing to go so softly as I am forced to do, yet still as they come on, they bid me be of good cheer, and said that it was the will of their Lord that comfort should be given to the feeble-minded, and so went on their own pace. When I was come to Assault Lane, then this giant met with me, and bid me prepare for an encounter. But alas, feeble one that I was, I had more need of a cordial. So he came up and took me. I believed not that he should kill me. So when he got me into his den, since I was not with him willingly, I believed I should come out alive again, for I have heard that not any pilgrim that is taken captive by violent hands, if he keeps heart whole towards his master, is, by the laws of Providence, to die by the hands of the enemy. Robbed I looked to be, and robbed, to be sure, I am, but I have, as you see, escaped with life, for the which I thank my King as the author, and you as the means. Other brunts I also look for, but this I have resolved on, to wit, to run when I can, to go when I cannot run, and to creep when I cannot go. As to the principal thing, I thank him that loves me, I am fixed. My way is before me, my mind is beyond the river that has no bridge, though I am, as you see, but of a feeble mind.
Then said old Mr. Honest,
Have not you some time ago been acquainted with one Mr. Fearing, a pilgrim?
Acquainted with him? Yes, he came from the town of Stupidity, which lies 4 degrees northward of the city of Destruction, and as many off of where I was born. Yet we were well acquainted, for indeed he was my uncle, my father's brother. He and I have been much of a temper. He was a little shorter than I, but yet we were much of a complexion.
I perceive you know him, and I am apt to believe also that you are related one to another, for you have his whitely look, a cast like his with your eye, and your speech is much alike.
Most have said so that have known us both, and besides, what I have read in him I have for the most part found in myself.
Come, sir,
said good Gaius.
Be of good cheer. You are welcome to me and to my house. What thou hast a mind to, call for freely, and what thou wouldst have my servants do for thee, they will do it with a ready mind.
Then said Mr. Feeble-mind,
This is an unexpected favour, and as the sun shining out of a very dark cloud. Did giant Slaygood intend me this favour when he stopped me, and resolved to let me go no farther? Did he intend that, after he had rifled my pockets, I should go to Gaius, mine host? Yet so it is.
Now, just as Feeble-mind and Gaius were thus in talk, there came one running, and called at the door, and said that about 1.5 miles off there was one Mr. Not-right, a pilgrim, struck dead upon the place where he was with a thunderbolt.
Alas,
said Mr. Feeble-mind,
is he slain? He overtook me some days before I came so far as hither, and would be my company-keeper. He also was with me when Slaygood, the giant, took me, but he was nimble of his heels, and escaped. But it seems he escaped to die, and I was taken to live. What, one would think, doth seek to slay outright, oft-times delivers from the saddest plight. That very Providence, whose face is death, doth oft-times to the lowly life bequeath. I was taken, he did escape and flee. Hands crossed gives death to him, and life to me.
Now about this time Matthew and Mercy were married. Also Gaius gave his daughter Phoebe to James, Matthew's brother, to wife. After which time they yet stayed about 10 days at Gaius's house, spending their time and the seasons like as pilgrims used to do. When they were about to depart, Gaius made them a feast, and they did eat and drink and were merry. Now the hour was come that they must be gone, wherefore Mr. Greatheart called for the bill of charges. But Gaius told him that at his house it was not the custom of pilgrims to pay for their entertainment. He boarded them by the year, but looked for his pay from the good Samaritan, who had promised him, at his return, whatsoever charge he was at with them, faithfully to repay him. Then said Mr. Greatheart to him,
Beloved, thou doest faithfully, whatsoever thou doest to the brethren and to strangers, which have borne witness of thy liberal giving before the church, whom if thou yet bring forward on their journey after a godly sort, thou shalt do well.
Then Gaius took his leave of them all, and his children, and particularly of Mr. Feeble-mind. He also gave them something to drink by the way. Now Mr. Feeble-mind, when they were going out of the door, made as if he intended to linger. The which, when Mr. Greatheart espied, he said,
Come, Mr. Feeble-mind, pray do you go along with us. I will be your conductor, and you shall fare as the rest.
Alas, I want a suitable companion. You are all lusty and strong, but I, as you see, am weak. I choose therefore rather to come behind, lest, by reason of my many weaknesses, I should be both a burden to myself and to you. I am, as I said, a man of a weak and feeble mind, and shall be injured and made weak at that which others can bear. I shall like no laughing, I shall like no gay attire, I shall like no unprofitable questions. Nay, I am so weak a man as to be harmed with that which others have a liberty to do. I do not yet know all the truth. I am a very ignorant Christian man. Sometimes, if I hear any rejoice in the Lord, it troubles me, because I cannot do so too. It is with me as it is with a weak man among the strong, or with a sick man among the healthy, or as a lamp despised. He that is ready to slip with his feet is as a lamp despised in the thought of him that is at ease, so that I know not what to do.
But, brother,
said Mr. Greatheart,
I have it in my work to comfort the feeble-minded and to support the weak. You must needs go along with us. We will wait for you. We will lend you our help. We will deny ourselves of some things for your sake. We will not enter into doubtful questions before you. We will be made all things to you, rather than you shall be left behind.
Now all this while they were at Gaius's door, and behold, as they were thus in the heat of their discourse, Mr. Ready-to-halt came by, with his crutches in his hands, and he also was going on a pilgrimage. Then said Mr. Feeble-mind to him,
How camest thou hither? I was but now complaining that I had not a suitable companion, but thou art according to my wish. Welcome, welcome, good Mr. Ready-to-halt. I hope thou and I may be some help.
I shall be glad of thy company,
said the other.
And good Feeble-mind, rather than we part, since we are happily thus met, I will lend thee one of my crutches.
Nay,
said he,
though I thank thee for thy good will, I am not inclined to halt before I am lame. Howbeit, I think, when occasion is, it may help me against a dog.
If either myself or my crutches can do thee a pleasure, we are both at thy command, good Feeble-mind.
Thus, therefore, they went on. Mr. Greatheart and Mr. Honest went before, Christiana and her children went next, and Mr. Feeble-mind came behind, and Mr. Ready-to-halt with his crutches. Then said Mr. Honest,
Pray, sir, now that we are upon the road, tell us some profitable things of some that have gone on pilgrimage before us.
With a good will. I suppose you have heard how Christian of old did meet with Apollyon in the valley of humiliation, and also what hard work he had to go through the valley of the shadow of death. Also I think you cannot but have heard how Faithful was put to it by Madam Wanton, with Adam the first, with one Discontent, and Shame, 4 as deceitful villains as a man can meet with upon the road.
Yes, I believe I have heard of all this. But, indeed, good Faithful was hardest put to it with Shame. He was an unwearied one.
Ay, for, as the Pilgrim well said, he of all men had the wrong name.
But pray, sir, where was it that Christian and Faithful met Talkative? That same was also a notable one.
He was a confident fool, yet many follow his ways.
He had liked to have deceived Faithful.
Ay, but Christian put him into a way quickly to find him out.
Thus they went on till they came to the place where Evangelist met with Christian and Faithful, and foretold them what should befall them at Vanity Fair. Then said their guide,
Hereabouts did Christian and Faithful meet with Evangelist, who foretold them of their troubles which they should meet with at Vanity Fair.
Say you so? I dare say it was a hard chapter then, that he did read unto them.
It was, but he gave them encouragement withal. But what do we talk of them? They were a couple of lion-like men. They had set their faces like flint. Do not you remember how undaunted they were when they stood before the judge?
Well, Faithful bravely suffered.
So he did, and as brave things come on't. For Hopeful and some others, as the story relates it, were converted by his death.
Well, but pray go on, for you are well acquainted with things.
Above all that Christian met with after he had passed through Vanity Fair, one Bunyan was the arch one.
Bunyan? What was he?
A very arch fellow, a downright deceiver, one that would be religious, which way soever the world went, but so cunning that he would be sure never to lose or suffer for it. He had his mode of religion for every fresh occasion, and his wife was as good at it as he, and he would turn and change from opinion to opinion, yea, and plead for so doing too. But as far as I could learn, he came to an ill end with his Bunyans, nor did I ever hear that any of his children were ever of any esteem with any that truly feared God.
Now, by this time they were come within sight of the town of Vanity, where Vanity Fair is kept. So, when they saw that they were so near the town, they consulted with one another how they should pass through the town, and some said one thing, and some another. At last Mr. Greatheart said,
I have, as you may understand, often been a conductor of pilgrims through this town. Now, I am acquainted with one Mr. Manason, a Cyprusian by nature, an old disciple, at whose house we may lodge, if you think good.
Said he.
We will turn in there.
Content,
said Old Honest.
Content,
said Christiana.
Content,
said Mr. Feeblemind, and so they said all. Now, you must think that it was eventide by that they got to the outside of the town. But Mr. Greatheart knew the way to the old man's house, so thither they came, and he called at the door. And the old man within knew his tongue so soon as ever he heard it. So he opened the door, and they all came in. Then said Manason, their host,
How far have ye come to-day?
So they said,
From the house of Gaius, our friend.
I promise you,
said he,
you have come a good stitch. You may well be weary. Sit down.
So they sat down.
Come, what cheer, sirs? I dare say you are welcome to my friend.
I also,
said Mr. Manason,
do bid you welcome, and whatever you want, do it say, and we'll do what we can to get it for you.
Our great want a while since was a resting place and good company, and now I hope we have both.
For resting place, you see what it is. For good company, that will appear in the trial.
Well,
said Greatheart,
will you have the pilgrims up into their lodging?
I will,
said Mr. Mnason. So he had them up to their several places, and also showed them a very fair dining-room, where they might be and sup together, until time should come to go to rest. Now, when they were set in their places, and were a little cheery after their journey, Mr. Honest asked his landlord if there were any store of good people in the town.
We have a few, for, indeed, they are but a few when compared to them on the other side.
But how shall we do to see some of them? For the sight of good men to them that are going on pilgrimage is like the appearing of the moon and stars to them that are sailing upon the seas.
Then Mr. Mnason stamped with his foot, and his daughter Grace came up. So he said unto her,
Grace, go you, tell my friends, Mr. Contrite, Mr. Holyman, Mr. Lovesaint, Mr. Dare Not Lie, and Mr. Penitent, that I have a friend or two at my house, who have a mind this evening to see them.
So Grace went to call them, and they came, and after salutation made, they sat down together at the table. Then said Mr. Mnason, their landlord,
My neighbours, I have, as you see, a company of strangers come to my house. They are pilgrims. They come from afar, and they are going to Mount Zion. But who,
quoth he,
do you think this is?
Pointing with his finger to Christiana.
It is Christiana, the wife of Christian, that famous pilgrim, who, with Faithful his brother, was so shamefully handled in our town.
At that they stood amazed, saying,
We little thought to see Christiana when Grace came to call us. Wherefore this is a very comfortable surprise.
They then asked her of her welfare, and if these young men were her husband's sons. And when she told them they were, they said,
The King whom you love and serve, make you as your father, and bring you where he is in peace.
Then Mr. Honest, when they had all sat down, asked Mr. Contrite and the rest in what posture their town was at present.
You may be sure we are full of hurry and fair time. 'Tis hard keeping our hearts and spirits in good order when we are in a cumbered condition. He that lives in such a place as this, and has to do with such as we have, has need of a hint to caution him to take heed every moment of the day.
But how are your neighbors for quietness?
They are much more moderate now than formerly. You know how Christian and Faithful were used at our town. But of late, I say, they have been far more moderate. I think the blood of Faithful lieth as a load upon them till now. For since they burned him, they have been ashamed to burn any more. In those days we were afraid to walk the street, but now we can show our heads. Then the name of a Christian was hated. Now specially in some parts of town, for you know our town is large, religion is counted honourable.
Then said Mr. Contrite to them,
Pray, how fareth it with you in your pilgrimage? How stands the country towards you?
It happens to us as it happeneth to wayfaring men. Sometimes our way is clean, sometimes uphill, sometimes downhill. We are seldom at a certainty. The wind is not always on our back, nor is everyone a friend that we meet with in the way. We have met with some notable rubs already, and what are yet behind we know not. But, for the most part, we find it true that has been talked of old. A good man must suffer trouble.
You talk of rubs. What rubs have you met withal?
Nay, ask Mr. Greatheart, our guide, for he can give the best account of that.
We have been beset 3 or 4 times already. First, Christiana and her children were beset by 2 ruffians, who, they feared, would take away their lives. We were beset by giant Bloody Man, giant Maul, and giant Slaygood. Indeed, we did rather beset the last than were beset of him, and thus it was, after we had been some time at the house of Gaius mine host, and of the whole church. We were minded upon a time to take our weapons with us, and go and see if we could light upon any of those that were enemies to pilgrims, for we heard that there was a notable one thereabouts. Now Gaius knew his haunt better than I, because he dwelt thereabout, so we looked and looked, till at last we saw the mouth of his cave. Then we were glad and plucked up our spirits. So we approached up to his den, and lo, when we came there, he had dragged by mere force into his net this poor man, Mr. Feeble Mind, and was about to bring him to his end. But when he saw us, supposing, as he thought, he had had another prey, he left the poor man in his house and came out. So we fell to it full sore, and he lustily laid about him, but, in conclusion, he was brought down to the ground, and his head cut off, and set up by the wayside, for terror to such as should after practice such ungodliness. That I tell you the truth. Here is the man himself to affirm it, who was as a lamb taken out of the mouth of the lion.
Then said Mr. Feeblemind,
I found this true, to my cost and comfort. To my cost, when he threatened to pick my bones every moment, and to my comfort, when I saw Mr. Greatheart and his friends with their weapons approach so near for my deliverance.
Then said Mr. Holyman,
There are but two things they have need to possess who go on pilgrimage, courage and an unspotted life. If they have not courage, they can never hold on their way, and if their lives be loose, they will make the very name of the pilgrim stink.
Then said Mr. Lovesaint,
I hope this caution is not needful among you. But truly there are many that go upon the road, who rather declare themselves strangers to pilgrimage than strangers and pilgrims in the earth.
Then said Mr. Dare Not Lie,
'Tis true, they have neither the pilgrim's weed nor the pilgrim's courage. They go not uprightly, but all awry with their feet. One shoe goeth inward, another outward, and they hosen out behind. There is here a rag, and there a rent, to the disparagement of their lord.
These things,
said Mr. Penitent,
they ought to be troubled for, nor are the pilgrims like to have that grace upon them, and their pilgrim's progress as they desire, until the way is cleared of such spots and blemishes.
Thus they sat, talking and spending the time until supper was set upon the table, unto which they went, and refreshed their weary bodies. So they went to rest. Now they stayed in this fare a great while at the house of Mnason, who, in the process of time, gave his daughter Grace unto Samuel, Christiana's son, to wife, and his daughter Martha to Joseph. The time, as I said, that they stayed here was long, for it was not now as in former times. Wherefore the pilgrims grew acquainted with many of the good people of the town, and did them what service they could. Mercy, as she was wont, laboured much for the poor, wherefore their bodies and backs blessed her, and she was there an ornament to her profession. And to say the truth, for Grace, Phoebe, and Martha, they were all of a very good nature, and did much good in their places. They were also all of them very fruitful, so that Christian's name, as was said before, was like to live in the world. While they lay there came a monster out of the woods, and slew many of the people of the town. It would also carry away their children, and teach them to suck its whelps. Now no man in the town durst so much as face this monster, but all fled when they heard the noise of his coming. The monster was like unto no one beast on the earth. Its body was like a dragon, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. It made great havoc of children, and yet it was governed by a woman. This monster gave conditions to men, and such men as loved their lives more than their souls accepted of those conditions. So they came under. Now this Mr. Greatheart, together with those that came to visit the pilgrims at Mr. Mnason's house, entered into a covenant to go and engage this beast, if perhaps they might deliver the people of this town from the paws and mouth of this so devouring a serpent. Then did Mr. Greatheart, Mr. Contrite, Mr. Holyman, Mr. Dare Not Lie, and Mr. Penitent, with their weapons, go forth to meet him. Now the monster was at first very rampant, and looked upon these enemies with great disdain. But they so belaboured him, being sturdy men-at-arms, that they made him make a retreat. So they came home to Mr. Mnason's house again. The monster, you must know, had his certain seasons to come out in, and to make his attempts upon the children of the people of the town. Also these seasons did these valiant worthies watch him in, and did still continually assault him, insomuch that in process of time he became not only wounded, but lame. Also he has not made that havoc of the town's children as formerly he had done, and it is verily believed by some that this beast will die of his wounds. This, therefore, made Mr. Greatheart and his fellows of great fame in this town, so that many of the people that wanted their taste of things yet had a reverent esteem and respect for them. Upon this account, therefore, it was that these pilgrims got not much hurt here. True, there were some of the baser sort that could not see more than a mole, nor understand any more than a beast. These had no reverence for these men, and took no notice of their valour or adventures. Well, the time grew on that the pilgrims must go on their way, wherefore they prepared for their journey. They sent for their friends, they talked with them, they had some time set apart therein to commit each other to the protection of their prince. There were again that brought them of such things as they had, that were fit for the weak and the strong, for the women and the men, and so loaded them with such things as were necessary. Then they set forward on their way, and their friends accompanying them so far as was convenient, they again committed each other to the protection of their king, and parted. They, therefore, that were of the pilgrims' company went on, and Mr. Greatheart went before them. Now the women and children being weakly, they were forced to go as they could bear, by which means Mr. Ready-to-halt and Mr. Feeble-mind had more to sympathize with their condition. When they were gone from the townsmen, and when their friends had bid them farewell, they quickly came to the place where Faithful was put to death. There, therefore, they made a stand, and thanked him that had enabled him to bear his cross so well, and the rather, because they now found that they had a benefit by such manly suffering as his was. They went on, therefore, after this a good way farther, talking of Christian and Faithful, and how Hopeful joined himself to Christian after that Faithful was dead. Now they were come up with the hill Lucre, where the silver mine was which took Damus off from his pilgrimage, and into which, as some think, Bunyan fell and perished. Wherefore they considered that. But when they were come to the old monument that stood over against the hill Lucre, to wit, the pillar of salt, that stood also within view of Sodom and its stinking lake, they marvelled, as did Christian before, that men of that knowledge and ripeness of wit as they were should be so blind as to turn aside here. End of Part 2, Chapter 7.